What's up, guys? This is the latest edition of the Captain's Log on United Football Media. Brandon's not here. He took Super Bowl weekend off. We've got Nick Thorn from Pro Football Newsroom. Nick, what is this show all about?
Memphis.
Memphis. Nothing but Memphis. Everywhere we go, it's Memphis. Memphis, Tennessee.
It's all about Memphis, baby, here on the United Football Media, the Captain's Log. It's me and Brandon. Thorn stepping in. As you see, I got a nice title for him. He can't see it, but his name's on the screen right now. Thorn, you can follow him on Twitter at Thorn PFN. Thorn, give us a little background about yourself.
Yeah, so kind of my spring football history starts with the XFL when they had the draft. They had the draft, but they didn't have rosters anywhere. And so I just started, I just made a little roster, Excel sheet where I filled out who was with who so I could get it together in my brain. And then it just kind of kept ballooning out and out until now I have this behemoth, reference page that I keep on Google Sheets, which, if anyone's interested in that, you can look on my Twitter. It's my pinned tweet, but I have a player history on every player in the league. I have a free agent page. I have coaching staffs. I have, anything I think that a fan would want to see, especially, if any of you are getting into fantasy, that chart, I think a lot of people use. It gets pretty popular around this time of year, but that's my big thing. I also work for Towson in their recruiting department as a student assistant there too. So just, keep myself busy.
Nice. DC Defender fan too, though, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Since 2020?
Yes. I was at the first game, 2020.
Okay, awesome.
So I was an AAF fan too, go Hot Shots, but that was really when things kind of started getting more intense with my, fandom.
Well, I can tell you, you've been mentioned on this show every single episode. We've referenced your Google rosters. I know Brandon appreciates as well the whole UFM, your hard work, man, because you're more up to date than Fox Sports sometimes, and also the league website. So I really appreciate it because actually I clicked you hard first. What's that?
Makes my life hard.
Yeah. Between you and Larson, I think we got everyone covered. So I think we're good.
For sure. He does a lot of great work. So
the big news this week was the coaching staff. I think Larson released a lot of them. Mm-hmm. First, I want your opinion on Ken Whisenhunt.
Yeah, I thought it was an interesting move. You're getting kind of that veteran presence. You're not looking for an up and comer, kind of that not retirement's harsh, but a guy who's in his twilight years. He's not going to be going back to the NFL to be a head coach anymore, but still wants to coach ball. And so, I will see as we get into it. It'll be interesting. I don't know what that offense is really going to look like, which, we'll get into it, but seems like he'll be the offensive coordinator, which is, something that kind of surprised me. So he'll be a little bit more hands-on than a Jeff Fisher was for the Panthers in 2022 or, some of these kind of similar guys. But yeah, all in all, it wasn't a bad hire. I'm kind of wait and see mode. I'm not overreacting in any way.
Yeah. Now, do you remember when they made it to the Super Bowl? Ken Whisenhunt?
Yeah. Maybe this will make you feel old, but the game before that was, I'm a Ravens fan, the Ravens Steelers championship game. And that is the first game I can remember anything from. Oh, wow. So I was 6 years old.
Oh, wow. All right. Yeah, you all make me feel old.
So not really, but yeah, he has a resume, obviously, he has a great resume. And obviously the big thing, I think the reason why they got him there is because he has those Tennessee ties, Nashville, not Memphis, but I think that plays into it a lot with, being the Titans head coach. Even though it's, I know Memphis and Nashville, they're very different. They're on opposite sides of the thing, but I think that played into it a lot.
Well, when he was the head coach at Tennessee, he had a defensive coordinator
Sure did.
named Ray Horton. Now he's with the Memphis Showboats on the other side of the state, and he's got a brand new defensive coordinator. Jaron obviously is a cult icon in the spring league football. Give me some feedback for Jaron Horton.
It felt like the perfect match, right? Where you kind of get the Pittsburgh Steelers, history there with Ken Wisenhunt and Ray Horton too. They were both there. Obviously, they were coaching together in Tennessee, but Jaron is kind of that tree too. And obviously, he had the success with the Maulers in 2023.
That's frankly the only reason I think he gets a spot like this, where like it's gonna be obvious that he's gonna run the show on defense. It's his defense.
And so, like, I think it's a slam dunk hire. Very rarely does a guy like that just kind of fall into your lap in a situation like this. Good dude. Every interaction I've had with him has been phenomenal. And so I'm just ecstatic about it because, like, he's a guy who these leagues should be cultivating, a young up and coming guy who has had success at this level. He's the guy who, we're getting expansion here in a couple of years. I hope we get more guys like that to get opportunities, but that's getting a little ahead of ourselves. He's got to succeed here in Memphis. And right now I'm just really excited because I think he's going to do a great job.
Well, he brought a lot of guys that he already knows, right? With Gilbert, Boog, Nas, Green May, Eli Walker. Like, there's a lot of familiarity. Plus, he's bringing his linebackers, special teams coordinator, Mark Hull, with him, the coach, and Steve Meyer. You have any feedback on those two guys?
Not as much. Obviously, I think the special teams for the Maulers was really good. So, it's one of those things where it's like, okay, obviously he has his guys. So once Horton gets the defensive coordinator role, those guys are available. They're going to get spots. They're going to get opportunities. So, like, I don't have anything specifically like, oh, I think they're going to be great at this or this, anything really specific other than, like, these are guys that Jaron knows he can work with. He has the experience with. So, like, yeah, they were the obvious guys to get roles like that.
Yeah, they're guys that have Steeler connections too.
Yes. And Mahler
both of them coaching in Pennsylvania for a while. So,
yeah.
What about Brian Baker, the defensive line coach? Veteran everywhere.
Yeah, I don't have like his history in front of me right now, but like getting experience in that room can only help. Especially Jaron, younger up and coming coordinator. Obviously, he knows how to handle his stuff. It's not like he's some fresh faced guy who's getting a promotion for the first time. He's been at this level. But like the more experience, the merrier when it comes to, getting those guys who've been around for decades and, you can kind of leave that room to them. You don't have to babysit them. It's like, okay, we know that you're going to do a great job and we don't have to worry about that room at all.
Definitely. Let's switch over to the offensive side. Ken Wisenhunt's specialty.
Yep.
Your overall feel on this offensive staff, because it's kind of like all over the place, because you got the younger guys like TJ. I'm not going to butcher his last name. Like, I go back and forth. Like, I've butchered the last name. And then Luke Fernandez, the running backs coach. But then you got experienced people like Jim Turner. And then Lee Moore, the offensive quality control, brand new. He was on the Showboats last year.
Yeah.
What's your feel? Yeah.
I think immediately when just looking at it, Lee Morris like stuck out because it was like, oh, I guess he's retired now. Like, he wasn't even officially retired. So it kind of surprises you. But like that, especially, I mean, like, obviously, yes, you want that mix of young and old and like all these other guys are great hires too. So I'm not like going to ignore them because obviously they're going to have more of a role in actually forming this offense. But Lee Morris, I think, is the one that excites me the most because it's like, oh, these are like, this is an opportunity that this guy probably doesn't have unless he, is in spring ball for multiple years and, proves himself in that respect. And so getting guys like that in these like QC roles, like some might cry nepotism, but I think that's a really cool thing because it's a guy getting an opportunity that he would have never gotten had this not exist. So I always kind of keep an eye out on those sort of things of like, wow, that guy got, Zach Potter becomes the GM of Sacramento State. And I'm like, wow, that would have never happened for this guy if spring football didn't exist. And that's why I think it just is another like feather in the cap of like, this thing is here to stay and that this thing is a net good for the football ecosystem. Ugh.
I got you.
Butchered that word.
So the biggest problem with the Showboats last year on the offensive side was the offensive line.
Mm-hmm.
They retained that one coach, but the roster changed quite a bit. Do you have like a history with Jim Turner at all, experience with it? Because if that offensive line doesn't get better, it doesn't matter what we talk about next about position groups, because that offensive line's got to be there. If you're a Showboats fan, should you have faith that this offense is going to fix itself?
I don't think the issue with the offensive line was coaching. I think it was much more a talent issue. And we can certainly like kind of zoom out with Memphis specifically and what went wrong last year, where with John DeFilippo and their old GM Dennis Polian, their strategy going into last year was we are going to make an all USFL team, and that's going to be good enough in the UFL. And that was not the case. Like you can't just like get the best of available from all these different teams and expect to win. You have to go after NFL guys. You have to get like a tier above, because suddenly these guys go from like the good starters to just fine. Like, cause you go from 16 teams to 8. Suddenly there's half as many starters. So everything rises. And so with that, the offensive line was a really bad case of that, where they got guys who were historically decent, but couldn't live up to the jump and play last year. And especially some guys that like weren't even that special before the merger, but like, they were flips guys and they hung around as their depth. And suddenly it was like, oh, we get into the season and we just don't have the guys. And because of the rules, you can't like cut your whole offensive line and try over. Like you had to stick with these guys. And we saw, to Jim Turner's credit, later in the year, they were able to move stuff around, and it was never good, but it got better. And like moving Alec Lindstrom and realizing he wasn't working at guard, moving him back to his natural position at center, and like moving some pieces around made it a little bit better and made them compete a little bit better in the last couple weeks of the season. But obviously I think the bigger thing is like, hey, they restarted on the offensive line. They bringing back almost nobody. And I think that's the much bigger thing than, having an offensive line coach return.
Awesome. You ready for the question of the week?
Yeah, let's do it.
And we're back with the question of the week. Kickoff rules. We're going to go to the NFL style, XFL style. I don't know what we're calling it. Your take on it, because for me personally, it's good for the guys getting promoted, but for excitement, I kind of like the USFL style, the UFL style. Your take, Nick Thorn.
Yeah, I've always had to walk on eggshells with this one because I kind of disagree with the fan consensus, at least on this side of the spring football ecosystem. I think the XFL kickoff is just better, honestly. The issues I had with the USFL one and the UFL one that they used last year is much more of like it felt more artificial in its excitement, where it's like, hey, we're just moving it back. And so now, the yardage is different. Like we're not like offenses are starting way further downfield. And where the XFL, it's like, okay, we're adding excitement, but we're not like changing the arithmetic of the game, where it's like the starting point's still basically the same, but it's just a much more interesting play. And I wasn't a fan of what the NFL did because they kind of nerfed it a little bit. But from what I've heard with Moose's comments at the Super Bowl, Radio Row stuff, it seems like they're not necessarily just going to copy the NFL. They're going to look at the XFL one too and make it a little bit closer to what the XFL had, where like they had almost 100% returns. It's not like the NFL where it was like 30% or whatever it was for this. And so I think like it's not an issue of necessarily like guys losing reps because there's so many touchbacks. I think it's still going to be a similar amount of reps. And I think it's going to be a more interesting play. So like, I know like the PFN, UFM, that's a controversial take, but I think this is the correct move, and not just because of like it gets guys to the NFL move, but it also does that too, for sure.
Yeah, that's my only holdup with it is that I felt like, especially in the USFL, there was a lot of returns. The guys like Simmons and all those kick returners, there was a lot of big plays. In the NFL, there weren't a ton of big plays. I guess I just like to see the long returns. And with the quarterbacks, it gave the better field position typically. Mm-hmm. And those 10, 15 yards maybe could have helped for a touchdown. I don't know. It just seems more exciting. I don't have the numbers to back me up right now, but I just felt like it was a more exciting game because they started a little bit higher up. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think I agree in that, like, if they just take the NFL one, I'm going to understand it, but I'd be a little bit disappointed. I'm much more looking at the XFL one and thinking that they're going to go back to the XFL way and not try to do like the half measure the NFL did, where they still kind of kept the ability to like just boot it out the back. In the XFL, you couldn't do that. Like it would be a huge penalty. So teams didn't do that. It's also going to save the legs of the kicker. Like every kicker that like did the kickoffs is like, thank God. Destroying put out I think an Instagram comment about it, and he's like, oh my God, like my leg is going to be saved because I don't have to like, just like wind up on it every single time to just try to, maybe get close to the, the end zone. It'll save kickers' legs a little bit, but we'll see what all the rules. Hopefully they, I've always said that if they did the XFL kickoff and the USFL extra point, that would be perfect for me. So we'll see if they keep the XFL where you have to, the 1 point is still a play from scrimmage. We'll see on that. We should be getting the rules here in a couple weeks. Camp's only in like 2 weeks, so we'll see what that is when we get there.
All right. Well, you heard Nick Thorn's take on the kickoff. Leave a comment. Tell him where he's wrong. Tell him if you're supportive. I'll get the comments over to Nick Thorn.
Appreciate that.
Yeah, no problem. All right, let's go to the Showboats. You're the roster guru.
Yeah.
We're going to go position group by position group. Big news this week, obviously, with Showboats. EJ Perry got picked up from the Michigan Panthers. It makes Dormady, Troy, and EJ Perry.
Yeah.
Troy's my guy. He's always been my guy. I think he's a good game manager. I think when you're a game manager, you're successful. I know you're going to come with someone else. If you had to pick a starter right now, who is it?
Gun to my head, I'm saying EJ Perry, but I don't think it's like I'm not like confident in that move. I think it really depends on like where they view the roster, because I think they're all kind of similar in my ratings. Like I think I view them all as like a similar caliber, but I think they all have like different strengths and weaknesses to their game that make them interesting and really just kind of depend upon what the Showboats need. And assuming they don't make moves, which I think they could absolutely add a guy to this room right now. I don't think there's anyone like the room's at a state where like if a guy shows up, they should pounce on it. But where it is, like I could totally see them making a switch mid-season too, where like they go with the guy and they're like, okay, we'll switch there, unfortunately, because they're all kind of similar in my book. But why I'm picking Perry is more of a question of upside than the other, than anything else, where Perry, he joined the Michigan Panthers late in 23. He had like 2 weeks of practice before he was the starter. And it wasn't pretty until that second half of the Maulers game where he just like a switch went on or something, where suddenly he was the guy. And he, if it wasn't for Troy Williams having his best half of his career 9 times out of 10 you're winning that game and you're going to Birmingham in the championship game. And so Michigan was really excited about him. They brought him back, and he was supposed to be the guy going into last year, and we just didn't see that guy come back. There was a lot of turnovers. He had like a hilarious turnover worthy play percentage, like way higher than everyone else through like 2 or 3 weeks. And right when he started to like seem to be settling in, he got hurt and it was just over. And so with Perry, I think of the 3, he's the one that like is the most like what's behind door number 3 kind of guy, where like I know what Troy Williams and what Quentin Dormady is. I don't fully know what EJ Perry is, and he has the like traits where he's probably the best athlete of the 3. He definitely has the strongest arm. And so, you know, you bet on those things and you hope that he's able to figure it out. You hope the offensive line's better than what Michigan had early last year. I think he's the best guy. When it comes to Troy Williams, he's definitely your floor guy. I've always felt like Troy Williams is fine. Like I think some people love him because he was perfect for the Maulers because they could just rely on the defense, but that's not necessarily a guarantee this year. There's a lot of moving parts. I'm not saying Memphis is going to be the best defense right out the gate like they were in 23. And so with Troy, I just worry that like, okay, I think he's a decent athlete, but I don't think he's some great athlete. I think he's fine as a passer. I think he's that kind of like perfect backup where if your quarterback goes down and he comes in, he's a perfect guy to ride the ship and get you a few wins. But I don't think he's option A going into a season. And then Dormady, I think, is kind of even a tad worse. I thought for a while there that they were going to like have Dormady over Troy Williams, but at this point it seems like they like Troy too. I wasn't sure if he was going to get cut through this whole process. They've cut a lot of those old Showboats players, but with Dormady, I think he's a little bit, he's like a worse version of Perry where he doesn't have the upside, but he's still kind of erratic in his play where like some games he'll come in and he'll be like with the Guardians. He played against DC and torched the best defense in the league in 23. And then the next week had 5 turnovers and lost to Arlington. That's kind of the story on him is like, you just don't know what you're getting out of him. And so he's the one I think if you're betting on someone not being the guy, I think it's Dormady. But right now it just feels like there's an opening to where they can add somebody. And that's why last night your heart breaks when the Roughnecks get Anthony Brown, who would have, in my opinion, been like the perfect addition for Memphis. He would have been the guy, like no doubter for me. Right now it's like, oh, I think Memphis might have the worst room in the league, which is hard to say. Like it's much more of like wow, everyone else has done such a good job in their rooms. DC, we'll see. They still have a spot open. So, but I like Teamu. I'm a Teamu guy, but yeah, like it's just a tough room right now, but like, I promise I'll be more positive. Let's get to the running backs. I love the running backs.
You're fine. Is there another quarterback not on Memphis that you're excited to see this year? Any specific one?
Yeah. I'll actually, we'll do like a 2-parter here because I think right now there's 2 guys available that I think could potentially be Memphis guys. I think Matt Corral is the one that like I'm especially watching to see what happens in camp. If they've got Magoo in Birmingham, he seems like he would be the guy. I could see a universe where like Corral gets traded in camp because, okay, he's not the guy. And if they get Corral, I think they're golden. Like, I think Corral is one of the 5 best quarterbacks in the league right now. And there's a lot of talent in this league. So that's high praise. But as far as like quarterbacks across the league, I think Anthony Brown's the one I'm the highest on versus where consensus is. Like, I think a lot of people think like, oh, he's a good ad, but I value guys who do really well in the preseason. And like, I watched do really well in the preseason. Obviously he was a Ravens quarterback. So I watched all of his, 2 preseasons here, and he was torching up those like 3rd, 4th string cornerbacks and, defenders. And those are the guys that are playing in this league right now. Yeah. So I just think like he's a decent athlete. He's not like, that you see Ravens quarterback and you think, oh, he's a Lamar, he's going to run around. not really like he's athletic, but he's not that athletic. But I just think he's going to be a guy who's going to make the right reads. And like, he's one of the few quarterbacks in this league that's like played in an NFL game, which, you know, is not said a lot. But I'm also, I think for another guy, I think the one I'm most interested in seeing is Bryce Perkins, because I don't know what to think about him. Like I like him, but the sample size is small. Obviously, I'm dealing with the being wrong on Perry last year. I was very high on Perry, and that blew up in my face. But he's someone that has like all those traits like I talked about with Perry, where he is a dynamic athlete. He's got a good arm. Can a full off season with him on that team show that he can be even better and be one of the best teams and be an MVP candidate? I think it's in the cards. I also think he comes out and it's like, oh, when defenses have more tape on him, he's not what, you know, we think, and his play falls off, and he's a guy that's looking to be replaced. So he's the one I think I'm the most interested in seeing too.
That's awesome. So we did our quarterback rankings, me and Brandon, a couple episodes ago, and the biggest question mark about Michigan was it going to be Perkins or Perry? Because for some reason it seemed like Nolan was very loyal to Perry, but now I think that job is Perkins. I think he's gonna. I think he's gonna be an athlete to take over this kind of league. He's like the perfect quarterback in my mind for a league that like this. Yeah,
I mean, you got to be a dynamic athlete at this level. Offensive lines aren't good enough to be that pocket passer unless you have like an elite processor. That's like what Perez does, and that's why that works, is that like his processor is better than everyone else in the league. But there's not that many guys like this. And you know, as a Maulers fan, you've cycled through a lot of pocket passers that have not worked, right? Like you look at like your Kyle Lalettas, your James Morgans, that type of quarterback just doesn't really work at this level. And so someone like Perkins, but like you look across the league, I think kind of everyone has good athletes. Like there's not like an unathletic quarterback. Perez is like the only one really, because like you got Teamu, Mon's athletic. Duggan is probably the best athlete, I'd say, at quarterback. If not, he's one of them. You know, Magoo's going to run around. Brown's going to run around. And then Perry or even Troy Williams, like, you know, Perkins, you know, for the last guy there. Like, they're all good athletes. So I think teams, that's something that teams have wised up on for sure.
Yeah, definitely, because of the offensive line. We'll go to the Showboats offensive line. We kind of touched on it when we talked about the coaches. Is there a specific guy on the offensive line that you're like, hey, this was a good move by the Boats? Or was it just all of the moves in general?
Yeah, I think in general with Memphis, they're really good at getting on base, but not necessarily hitting home runs. And we'll see that. There's a few guys that I really like with this team, which we'll get to. But the offensive line reads to me as a lot of getting on base, where they're adding guys that like they're not all going to work out. But I think Gillum is the one that like you look at his resume and you say, okay, he's probably a starter. He's probably your center this year, unless you can get Lindstrom back. Maybe you move him to guard. Sorry, my cat's going in the background. I don't know if you can hear that. At guard, you've got Ryan Johnson and Nick Torres as like some young guys that like I'm not I like could work out, but like I'm not betting on either of them individually. I like Nash Jensen. Yeah. I think he'll be a guy for you. He'll be a starting guard. And then tackle is really where I'm like concerned. I like Henderson and I like Tunsil, who's your two guys you have in that room right now. I don't know if I would love going into camp with either of them as your plan A as an offense, as a starter. They're guys that like are young, up and coming guys. And to the credit of Jim Manos, the GM of the Memphis, they have gotten so much younger. And so there's young guys. I mean, like I mentioned, the two guys who are rookies at guard, and, you know, like they have added a lot of youth. And so some of these guys are going to hit, and you're going to get like the best guard in the league or the best, you know, defensive tackle in the league, whatever. It's going to happen on a couple times. but it's not going to happen everywhere. And so there's going to be a process there. I think looking forward, a guy like Mason Brooks is someone to really keep an eye on at tackle of a potential ad. He finished the season, I think it was with Washington, but he was a Memphis draft pick in 23. And he's a guy that like, okay, he's a plug and play tackle. Maybe you're able to get, an Alex Leatherwood to throw out a notable name or someone else. But tackle is the spot where it's like, I need to see more before I, consider this a strength for them for sure.
Definitely. I can't agree anymore. The offensive tackle on both sides are definitely opportunities. One room that I think Manos has done really good with is the running backs.
Yes.
They've loaded up 4 new guys. No one's coming back. Who's your guy? Who's your horse in this race?
My horse is absolutely Jacob Caboti. He is the one of the 4 that if I'm betting on him. He's the guy. I don't do UFL fantasy, but if I was, I don't know where he's going to be, but I'm taking him. Like he's someone that I believe in. And maybe it's a little personal because, I've been tracking NFL free agents. So he was kind of on my radar already because he's the guy who's like bounced off and on. So he kind of pops up a lot on like, oh, he got cut. Oh, he got signed. Oh, he got cut. Especially with New Orleans, kind of went back and forth with him throughout the year. And then in the middle of December, he signs with Cleveland. And then Cleveland's whole team dies. And they're like, everyone's on IR. They have no running backs left. They have Deonta Foreman as like their only healthy running back in week 18, the final week of the year. And Jacob Caboti has to get elevated to be the RB2 in an NFL game this year, which is already ridiculous that this dude is signed to Memphis. I'm shocked that Memphis was able to get him. But he also performed pretty well against the Ravens. I watched it live. And like the Ravens defense is like one of the best run defense in the league this previous year. And he performed admirably. Like he looked like he belonged. I think it was like 5 carries for 24 yards, had a catch for 15. Nothing like, he's not like, if he played like amazing, he probably wouldn't be here right now, but he held his own. And I took note of that. I was like, wow, that guy was just on the street like 2 weeks ago. And then season ends and then they don't re-sign him and nobody else re-signs him and suddenly he falls in Memphis's lap. And so I don't think anyone's talking about him, but I think he's the guy in that room right now. But it seems like with the type of guy they've gotten, they have now 4 guys that are all similar, like bigger backs. Yeah. Like they don't have like this small little like Anthony McFarland type. They have all big backs. I think whoever wins that role, like there'll be some like filtering through, but whoever's the RB1 is going to be the RB1 and get the bulk of it. Denerick Prince is the other guy they signed recently. He also finished the season on a practice squad, which, you usually don't get that many guys who like sign that quickly after the year. So that's another guy that you're keeping an eye on. He didn't play really, but he's someone you'd be excited about. And then Dwayne McBride, I think, is the one that everyone talks about because he's like the notable name. He was the draft pick, but he kind of struggled with Minnesota the 2 years he was there. There's a reason he didn't like stick on a practice squad this year. I don't think he really looked that good in the preseason. So we'll see. Like obviously he's the most productive college player of the 3, and he's the guy who people like were like really excited. And I was excited when he got signed too, but with the other 2 in the room, I just am not as high on him. And DeAndre Torrey, we'll see. He's a guy, spring football vet. We'll get into it as we go through the roster, but I feel like Memphis has had to kind of fill out their roster with some of these spring football vet types who haven't been able to stick in recent years, whether because of the merger or because they didn't make a team last year. Or they got cut this offseason. They have a lot of guys like that where I'm like, I think this might be just like, hey, we can't find another running back. We got our 3. We'll bring them to camp and see what happens.
Yeah. Another room that has a lot of competition is the wide receiver spot. Sure. David Davis obviously comes back, but there's a ton of new guys. Is there a guy out of the new signings that really sticks out for you? Or is just Dawood Davis the top guy and everyone else is kind of being WR2?
Yeah, I think Dawood's the guy for sure. Like, I still think he's going to be the one. If I'm drafting a Memphis wide receiver, it's him. Like, he's going to be the guy. He's going to have such a better surrounding cast this year and such a better situation. He'll have better quarterback play. Hopefully the offensive line will figure out. I mean, the offensive line's already better than what it was last year, but that's not saying much. I think if you're going to pick another guy, it's going to be Kwame Lassiter, solely because I genuinely think he's the only slot receiver in that room right now. It's kind of weird. They have like 7 outside receivers and one guy who's like a true slot. And they're like the outside receivers. It's not like, oh, well, he was 5'10", but he played outside in college. We'll move him inside. They're all like 6'2", 6'3", 6'5". And so like, other than like Dawood, maybe, but like, I don't think you move Dawood inside. I think he's better on the outside. And so I like Lassiter is the one that sticks out to me, and I have no idea who the other wide receiver is. Whether it's going to be like Dawood at the on the one side, and then you're picking your X, or vice versa. He's your X, and whatever. I don't know what the setup's going to look like, and I couldn't tell you who that other receiver is going to be right now. I put Joseph Skates because he's the one with the most experience, but Kyle Sheets is a great athlete that's like bounced around the NFL. John Adams is the notable name in that room. I've kind of pushed him down because he's a holdover, so I don't know if they're necessarily gonna just like, hey, it's John Adams again. All these young guys can fall in behind him, but I think it's going to be a competition for that, and I genuinely could not tell you. I think it's going to be a complete toss-up, and it'll be something where in like 2 weeks into camp, if you're hearing buzz about one of the other guys, that's when you're paying attention, because it's like, oh, there's an opening here. It's not just noise. Like, this guy could absolutely be that wide receiver too.
So this week we signed Kai Loxley, CFL vet. What do you think about Kai Loxley since he's a new guy?
He feels like a dart throw. He feels like a guy that's like, okay, he's a little older, played quarterback in college, converted in the CFL, might even obviously if he makes the team, he's someone to watch for like double forward passes and that sort of stuff for sure. But I'm not like betting on him being anything, but it's like a decent signing because it's like, okay, well, he has some upside, he's new at receiver. So like if he comes out and presses in camp, great, but I'm not like betting on him being the number 2 or anything.
So my guy on the offensive side of the ball, all these new signings, is Pierce, the tight end.
Yeah.
Do you agree with me or not that he is going to be a pretty solid weapon for this offense?
I think with Sage Surratt not re-signing, he's clearly the tight end 1 right now. Yeah. Jacob Warren is the other guy you've added, but he's more of a blocking tight end. He's not that like, we don't know exactly what this setup is, how much tight ends are going to be used in the scheme. That's all up in the air right now, something to watch for the first couple weeks of the season. But I think that Pierce is like your receiving threat, like prototypical tight end 1. He can block, but like he's more of a threat there. Warren's more your typical tight end 2. And then you got Izzo and JJ Wilson there too, but like those are more like, hey, the better those 2 guys is your tight end 3, and that's your room, assuming you don't add anyone.
Yeah, definitely. Let's switch over to the defensive side of the ball. It's got a yellow and black feel, obviously.
For sure.
What do you think about the defensive line? I think they're going to play similar to what the Maulers did, right? That kind of defense.
Oh yeah, for sure. That defense, and that's going to be a running theme of like who the new guys to replace the old guys are going to be. That's much more of a secondary conversation. But defensive line, obviously, the guy on the tin is Boogie, right? You're getting Boogie back. I think I'm going to have a similar take on all of these Mauler guys, which is that all the guys that they got were guys that couldn't stick in the UFL last year, right? For one reason or another. And so I'm not like assuming that they're going to go back to 2023 versions of themselves. I think
Ooh, you
somewhere,
know, Boogie watches this. Yeah, I'm just letting
for
you know.
sure.
Okay.
And I'm not picking on Boogie. I want to be clear on that. I'm just talking more generalities with this. But with Boogie, the reason I bring that up is that Boogie needs to be the 2023 version for this defensive line right now. I have him as the top interior defensive lineman. They added Masterson, young guy. He's my like other option inside the D line, but they really haven't done much to the D line room, which is unusual because every other place they've wiped the slate clean. And so I like Bronson. I like PJ Hall. Atkins is getting up there in age. We'll see. And then was it Famatu is the last guy, right? Yeah. He's been a depth guy for a couple of years, so I'm not like betting on him being the guy. If Boogie's not the dude this year, I don't know who is. And so that's really kind of the story with the D line is like, you know, and it's not even like a doubting Boogie thing. It's just like a wow, you know. A lot of these UFL teams hedge their bets in a lot of ways. Like Birmingham's the best at it, right? Where it's like, hey, if this guy doesn't work out, they got 3 other interesting guys behind him that are going, you know, if this guy like that, you know, and so that a team like them, they're going to have weird cuts in camp where it's like, oh, this guy didn't work out for them, but it doesn't matter because they got other guys. If Boogie doesn't work out, it's like, oh man, we got to look at the waiver wire because I don't know who else is going to like stand out in that room necessarily.
To go to the defensive end position.
Yeah.
I'm a big fan of Isaiah Greenway. I know you've got him 3rd on your depth chart. But now with Jaron Horton there and that defense, he seemed to hit the ground running. He's a younger guy, super athletic. Why do you have him a little bit lower?
I first off, you know, he was a late ad for the Maulers. And so he factored into the rotation, but he wasn't a starter for them at that point. So I think of that too. But also I kind of just like a lot of the other edge rushers. Player is going to be a starter for me out the gate because, you know, he's that similar to Boogie, similar to a lot of these guys. I'm valuing that relationship. And so I'm putting him as a starter right out the bat because he played 2 seasons under Horton. That relationship's there. I like Brevin Allen a lot. I think he was a guy I'm very happy that they were able to get. Is it Jalen Allen's the other one, right? Yep. He's also an interesting ad. DeMarcus Mitchell's a nice little ad too. I think he's a guy who was only pushed out of Birmingham because they just, if you look at their edge rushing group, it's special. Like that Birmingham legitimately has the best edge rushing group I've ever seen in spring football, period. And it's not even close. Like I think I think edge rusher 6 on Birmingham would be edge rusher 1 on Houston. Like it's that level of ridiculousness. So he's a guy who I think can still play. And he's a guy that I have low right now, but I think I wouldn't be shocked if he made that roster too. Green May is interesting, obviously, because it's surprising he's here at all. Because you know he's the assistant DPP at Wisconsin still, and so the fact that he's still keeping that dream alive, I think, is the most interesting story with him. And we'll see if this year, like, it's like, hey, he made the right move, and he's like, you know, full off season, like, oh, he's the guy, and he's this, you know, hidden gem that, you know, has to put his player personnel career on hold because he's going to the NFL. That'd be a great story. But, you know, for right now, it's like, okay, we'll wait and see on that room. There's a lot of guys in that room, though. It's one of the better rooms on the defense.
Definitely. And then we go to one of the most shallow rooms, the linebackers.
Yeah.
Vandenberg.
Yeah.
Your take, why is he not stuck in the NFL? Because he did excel in college. Mm-hmm. Pretty big deal, right? How come he hasn't been able to stay with an NFL team?
I think losing your rookie year is pretty devastating to an undrafted free agent. And so we'll see if, you know, as an ACL tear, I'm pretty sure. Yeah. We'll see if he's back 100%. He's a very interesting player, and he's someone that I think I'm very interested to see how Jaron Horton uses him. because he kind of can play edge rusher a little bit.
Yeah.
And I have him as an off-ball linebacker right now. We'll see how they utilize him, but especially because there's only 3 in the room right now. And I also think that they added Miles McCaney, who was like a combine guy who historically played edge rusher. I could see him moving to off-ball too to bolster the numbers there. I've considered doing that, but I'm going to wait until we see a depth chart or something proving that. But he has a more of an off-ball like build. He's a little bit lighter, but I think he's a guy that like you're excited to get. And the fact that Birmingham just was like, no, we're not interested. You can have him is you're laughing to the bank at that one. I mean, Birmingham doesn't really need him. They're so talented, but this is the kind of guy that like, hey, if he is pre-injury Zeke Vandenberg, you got a really good player, and you got a guy that might be getting towards your Keava Tizino replacement.
That's what I'm trying to figure out. Who is the Tez and who is the Ruben in this Jaron Horton's defense?
Yeah, I think right now, if you're saying, I think Zeke's the guy for one, because with the Mauler defense, right, they live in nickel, and so really there's only 2 starters at linebacker.
4-2-5.
Yeah, basically. Even if it's not on the tin, like that's effectively what they do, 90% of the time. And so I think the 2 young guys in Rigby and Russell are the guys that like whoever's better right now would be the other guy, but they have to add someone else. Like there's no way they're going into this season with just 3 guys in camp. Like there's going to be some other ad, and there's a decent amount of good linebackers out there available right now. So we'll see what they end up doing there. But, I think that's one where like we'll see between the 2 of them right now, but I could totally see them adding a guy, and it's like, okay, those guys are just backups.
Definitely. Now we go to one of the rooms that is so deep, the cornerback. Jaron Horton's specialty, Steve Meyer's specialty as a mauler. That was their strength a lot of the time, right? They had 3 safeties that were really, really good.
Yeah.
And then 2 corners. Give me one name. I'm guessing I already know the name, but give me one name in this cornerback room that you expect to stand out.
I think that if you can get Cam Dantzler of the Vikings version, he could be one of the best cornerbacks in the league. He's had a weird 2024 where he signed with San Antonio, and that blew my mind. I was like, oh my God, this is a guy I would have never guessed would be in spring football this quickly in his career. Didn't work out. He left the team after a week or 2. And so he never really played. And then he went to the CFL, and then that season ended and he didn't re-sign. I think that was much more of I want to see what I can get in America type thing. Yeah. He was waiting for an opportunity like this, I'm pretty sure. I don't know the guy, but that's just my supposition. But he's the perfect fit for this scheme. He lived in Minnesota in that quarters heavy scheme where he was a deep quarter 90% of the time. And although he struggled at the NFL level because there's just better athletes, and frankly, that was the very end of that Vic Fangio defense, where that final season he was at Minnesota, was it Ed Donatel was the defensive coordinator. He gets purged, and he gets fired at the end of the year. They bring in Brian Flores, who's the most stylistically different defensive coordinator they can. But if you get him to just do that at this lower level, I think he could be one of the best in the league. And so he's the guy that I'm putting at cornerback 1 right now, but there's so much talent to that room, especially the outside guys. Kind of don't know, especially because there's some question marks, which we'll talk about. I think Jaquan Shepard is your height, weight, speed guy. He's someone who didn't test super well. I think that's why he didn't get drafted. He probably could have been a late draft pick otherwise. Didn't really stick in the NFL either, first year player, but he's someone else that I'm very excited about. And then for the third outside cornerback, obviously your boy, Mark Gilbert. Yeah. He's the most interesting one here because again, we're talking about the 2023, 2024, 2023, he was the best cornerback in the USFL. Like, no debate. And so with him, if you can get that guy and him play at this level in this 18 league, and you get the, a top 3 cornerback in the league, this is like the best cornerback room in the UFL. But you have to keep in mind the 2024 season with Birmingham, where that he started off really hot. The first couple of weeks, he graded out super well. And then his play slowly kind of deteriorated. And there was some points where they really, like, teams were going after him. And it was like, oh man, what happened? Like, this guy was locking down, Joe Walker the year before. Like, this isn't the guy that people should be testing in theory. And he wasn't even active at the end of the year. And Birmingham let him go for free. And so if you're Memphis, you love that, because it's like, hey, we get this guy for free. Like, if we can get back to that and, him go back to Jared Horton, and magically it's like, okay, we got old, Mark Gilbert. It's like, you are ecstatic. Like, that is the best move of the offseason. But with cornerbacks, when they lose a step, it can get ugly. I think you look at Channing Stribling, who was the best cornerback in 2022 in the USFL and was good in 23. Suddenly in 24, he is unplayable. And so that worries me. And that's the only thing that makes me hold back on him. But yeah, I mean, like, I guess, obviously you're the Maulers guy. You're going to say, like, no, he's going to go right back to that, that level, but you just don't know. And so there's just a little of uncertainty there.
Yeah, I hope that he recovers from 2024.
Yeah, for sure.
He struggled. I'm surprised you have him 4th on your depth chart. I know that's not official or anything. You have Eric Guerra over that. Why is that?
So that's something, a subtlety with the depth chart that I can't really – I've thought about ways of describing this in the depth chart, and it always is clunky to me. But I do outside, slot corner.
Okay.
And then – so he's the 3rd outside corner.
Yep.
But I'm glad you mentioned Eric Guerra, because I think he could be the best slot corner in the UFL this year, and I'm pretty certain about it. The only thing that I think could get in the way of him being Bryce Torneden, but maybe even a touch better, is the fact that I think he might be moved to safety. I could see a universe where right now, we'll get to the safety room. It's kind of wide open right now, in my opinion. I think him and Lance Boykin are like the 2 slot corners. And I could see a universe where one of them becomes the Bryce Torneden and the other one kind of moves to more of a like free safety role. But Guerra was a guy who has legitimate NFL snaps at slot corner and was actually pretty good for the Titans in 2023. Didn't make the roster this year. New staff, that's part of it. He's a guy that, like, not only do I think like can be really good at the UFL, I think he's someone that's immediately on my guys I'm keeping an eye on if they are decent or going to the NFL. Like, I think he's the kind of guy that it gets an opportunity. And so he fits that Bryce Torneden role perfectly, in my opinion. And so he's a guy, if there's one guy I'm betting on for Memphis to be good, it's Eric Guerra.
Let's go to the returners. Kyrie, Woods, and Nehemiah Shelton. Shelton got an NFL call. You have him listed at the bottom of the depth chart. Is that because of the regime change? Maybe the scheme isn't fitting his game? Or do you really think that room just got so much better that he got moved back? Him and Kyrie. I
think that is a good sign for the room. I think him and Kyrie right now is slot corner 3 for me. Like, I think Boykin and Guerra are higher ahead there. He's another guy I've considered moving to safety. It's weird because, like, some people consider him a safety. Like, some places it's listed, but he's a slot corner. He's never played safety. So at least at the, USFL, UFL level, spring football level. But I just with Shelton, he's never been like, he's a guy who's gotten a lot of NFL opportunities, but he's never been great at the UFL level, and he's always been kind of a backup for Memphis. Like, he's never played significant reps. He's younger, so like, you know, there's a shot that like he puts it together and he has a good year. And Woods has been solid, but I think there's just better in the room right now. But it's also like, hey, you're glad you get guys like that because it's just more insurance. You know, I talk about hedging your bets earlier. These are guys that hedge your bets. Like, okay, if Guerrer isn't the, you know, God's gift to football, like I'm saying he is, and he's not a guy for you and he's not good and you cut him in camp, you have another slot corner that you know can play at a decent clip on this level. It just makes me more confident that even if like Mark Gilbert doesn't work out, or, you know, one of these guys, you know, Shepard, you know, isn't the athlete that I think he is, just adds insurance, you know, and makes me more confident, like, hey, this room's not going to be bad at minimum.
That's awesome. That's great to hear, because I think the corners and the safeties were kind of average to below average last year in the UFL.
It was really bad for Memphis.
I didn't want to go that bad. You know, this is a Showboats show.
I mean, not many are left in spring football. There's a reason, unfortunately.
Let's go to the safety room. With the Jaron Horton defense, the safety obviously has a lot of control. He had the Tarps and the Tordens, Eli Walker in his defense in Pittsburgh. What do you feel about the safety room? I know you said some corners might switch over to safety.
Yeah.
What about the Keaton Ellis and obviously Eli Walker?
Yeah. I feel similar at safety that I do the D-line, where I don't know if the depth's there right now. That's why I mentioned a lot of moving corners to safeties is kind of like, man, there's a lot of question marks. Obviously, Eli Walker still has that same thing that I've said a lot. Is just like, you hope that he's 2023. You don't know. There's no guarantee. It's been a year and a half since he's played football, so you just don't know. Didn't make it with Birmingham. Not saying it can't work out, and obviously I'm putting him there. But my point is that like he's option A. So like everyone else, I feel worse about. So Keaton Ellis is solid, but I don't have a lot to say about him. He's just, you know, a young guy getting into the room. He's someone ideally like you'd want to like have win a spot, but the other safeties I'm just not as impressed with. So I have him slotted in as your starter. The thing that shocked me is that they couldn't get Arnold Tarpley. Like the fact that he signed with Michigan is insane to me, because I thought like, oh, we're getting the band back together. It was just like especially like when I saw it, I thought it said Memphis at first, because I just assumed it was going to be Memphis. And then I was like, wait a second, that's Michigan. How did they, steal that guy from you? I don't know. But the room after those two guys is you have the Tenny Adewuse, who's a spring football vet, looked decent with San Antonio 2 years ago. Last year took a step back. Arlington's secondary was pretty rough. And the fact that they let him go when I'm not high on their secondary right now either, is a little concerning. He's a guy I would have guessed they would have brought back, given who's there in that room right now. And so that's a little concerning. But he's the vet, so I put him at 3. He's definitely the one I would like bet on of the rest of them, which is unfortunate. Obi Melifonwu has been out of football now for 3 seasons. He is like the prototypical athlete. He was a 2nd-round pick for a reason. He's height, weight, speed guy, someone that like a scout's falling in love with, but he's never been like an elite football player. Didn't work out in the NFL level. Was okay with Tampa Bay in 2022, but that was years ago, and didn't make the St. Louis team in 23. So that's a dart throw. He's 30 now, so he's getting up there in age too. And then the last 2 guys, James Jones and Amir Reep, are just like dart throws for me, where it's like, I don't like, they're not guys who've had, James Jones spent like a couple weeks as an inactive guy for Arlington last year. And Reep is, had some legal issues and played at a very low level of college his final year. And so both those guys are like, okay, if there's something great, like if they end up being like guys for you, awesome. But like, am I going to bet on a guy like that hitting? I think a team like Houston last year had a lot of those kind of guys in their secondary, where it was like, I don't know. They're young, so maybe, but they don't have a ton of experience. And so we'll see. And we saw that a lot of them didn't work out. And so, the safety room right now leaves a little bit to be desired, but there's so many guys in the room. I don't know if they're necessarily going to go out and add, 2 or 3 more, because you only have 5 spots left. It's not like it was a month ago where you had 20 spots and suddenly you can add anyone and every room looks perfect because, hey, they did a good job early in the offseason, added a bunch of good players. And so you think, oh, the good times are just going to keep rolling, but that's not necessarily the case now.
Let's talk about the specialists.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's one of their strong points. I think all 3 are pretty solid. I'm not the biggest expert on long snappers, but Cogs and Mangle, pretty good combination there between the kicker and the punter.
Yeah, it's solid. I don't obviously, I think it's ridiculous that Matt Coughlin didn't get an NFL gig this offseason. Like, he read to me as like an obvious guy to get it. So you're happy you get a guy like that back. I'm like Matt Mangle. It's obviously you got the Maulers connection. He was really good for the Maulers in 23. In general, I'm just like, I get excited with specialists when we get new names. Like, you got like Rodrigo Blankenship and those kind of stuff. So that's when I'm like, oh, okay, let's see what this guy has. It's, brand new thing. We kind of know what these guys are, but like also you could argue that like that's good. Like, you're not getting poor special teams play from these guys. And so there's a level there that, like, hey, these guys are going to be decent at minimum. You know what you're getting. And it's one less thing to worry about on a team where, like I mentioned, there's a decent amount of question marks. Special teams, I'm not worried about it. They got a good kicker. They got a good punter. They got a good long snapper. They're vets.
That's awesome. All right, if there was one room that you think is a stronghold, I think I know where you're going with this.
Yeah.
Defensive back, cornerbacks, the strongest room in the whole offense and defense.
Yeah, running back's up there. I think cornerback is the room is the most fun room. Maybe you could probably make the argument that running back's a stronger room because there's less guys who are question marks. Dantzler, you don't have like the weird 24 season. Mark Gilbert, you don't have the Beham stint that you're worried about. But so I think I actually, I've talked myself into it. I think I'm going to say running back's a little bit stronger, but I won't lie to you. Like, cornerback's the one I'm most excited to see this season.
The biggest opportunity, obviously, the offensive line, and you say the defensive tackle, really, the guys in the middle.
Yeah. I think if you added 2 good tackles and you added 1 good interior defensive lineman, there wouldn't be issues anymore. But we're not there yet, and you only have 5 spots, so we'll see. We'll see what they decide to do. But those are spots where it's kind of wait and see on.
Thank you, man. This has been great. I've learned a few things about the Showboats, so
Appreciate
learning from the expert, Nick Thorn, that is referenced, putting a face to the yacht club, that this is Nick Thorn that me and the captain always reference. I appreciate this. This has been awesome. When Brandon gets back from his little Super Bowl break, we'll have to do, add Brandon in here and have a conversation before the season started.
Sounds great.
All right. This has been the Captain's Log on the UFM.